It was about 18 years ago, I think, that my wife and I, we had just returned from India, and I had taken a job at a church in North Florida and Jacksonville, Florida. And I was a youth pastor and like the sports director of this church. And one of the first couples that we had dinner with when we first landed there was Mark and Gina Schmidt. Mark was working in like the finance part of the world, and Gina, I can't remember, what were you doing? What? All right, so she was a stay-at-home mom and working with the kids at 2 at that time. And man, a real friendship started to develop. And then Mark came on staff at the church where we were attending, and we shared an office space. It was about, 50 square feet is what it felt like. We were almost in each other's laps every day. And then at some point, I think it was about 9 years ago, they moved to Guatemala. And of course, 13 years ago, we had moved to Charlotte to start Watershed. And when they started doing work in Guatemala, right out of the gate, I said, we want to be a part of this. And about 3 months ago, maybe it's 3 months, 2 months, 3 months, Mark got a hold of me and said, hey, listen, we're actually going to be in Charlotte for a weekend. Is there any way you would want to hang out? And I'm like, yeah. In fact, will you come and will you sit on stage and just talk to our people about this relationship between Watershed and their organization, Educate BV, and like really connect the dots for us. And so, in fact, guys, why don't you come on up? Will you give a nice, warm welcome to Mark and Gina Schmidt, 2 of my dearest friends. So, we have sent, 5, 6 teams. Is that right, to Guatemala? I've lost count at some point. And I noticed you were hugging a lot of necks after the last one, a lot of familiar faces, right? Let us, if you could just give us a few moments and just create context for who your family is in this world. There's a photograph, I think, on the screen. Actually, before we do that, I know at the end of this, there's going to be a Q&A. So probably the last 15 minutes or so, I'm going to invite you, or actually the whole time we're doing this, I want to invite you to text questions you might have for Mark and Gina, and at the end we're going to enter into some sort of engagement through that process. So there's the phone number. If you want to go ahead and put that in your phone and start texting me questions, we'll field those in a moment. On the screen right now, there's a photograph. Who's in the photograph? Tell us about these people.
Okay. Good morning. Those people are my family, Mark and I, and our oldest daughter, Corinne, and her husband, Jackson. They got married last year. They live in Jacksonville, Florida. And then our son, Isaac, is next. He's 20. He'll be getting married next weekend. And then there's Mariah Bryn. She's 18, and she's studying to be a nurse. Then Eli is 16. He's here with us at church, and we're on our way to Liberty University after services because he's hoping to go there. And then last is Cruz. He's 7, and he was born in Guatemala.
Yeah.
That's us.
A robust crew, for sure. So, about 18 months, I think it was, 24 months into your experience in Guatemala, my daughter and I came in for a trip, and you started sort of baiting us with this, hey, we're going to take you somewhere and show you something here in a few days. We want to get you acclimated and oriented to kind of the stuff that we do here. And you drove us into the middle of this bean field. And we're gonna talk about the bean field in a moment, but can you just kind of revisit what was going on for you guys that first 18 to 24 months, some of the things that you were experiencing, the ways that you were trying to just make a difference really early on?
Yeah. So we actually landed on the ground in Guatemala in August of 2009. So we're coming up on our 9th anniversary this year. So those first months when we got there, we're this family. We're excited about being there. God had told us 6 months earlier to move to Guatemala, and we didn't do a whole lot of prep other than selling everything and going.
That's it?
That was pretty much it. I mean, we didn't raise support. We didn't know Spanish yet. So we get on the ground and we start learning Spanish. One of the key kind of values that we had was this idea that how can we as a family from North America just show up in this rural village and reform it. Like, that's kind of a proud thing to think that we know enough about this village to do that. And so we spent months, almost a year and a half, getting to know the village. And we moved there with a vision just to help people that needed help and to love people in Jesus' name. And so that's what we would do. We'd go out to the village as we're learning Spanish. We would go out and we'd visit people. And the more the community knew that we were there, what started happening is, so at the time, we didn't live in the village. We lived about 30-minute walk away, 5-10-minute car ride. People would walk over to our house and they'd knock on our door. So there'd be regular, every couple of days, a knock on the door from somebody who was in some type of a situation and needed help. One quick story is a young mother who had a baby in her arms. She was crying. She was scared to death. The baby couldn't breathe. I mean, it was struggling just to survive. What would you do? What did we do? We got our car keys and we rushed the baby down to the hospital because it was obvious that if something didn't happen, this poor mother was going to lose her baby. And so those are the types of things that we would do. Need would present itself. We would meet a need. Kids needed to be educated. We try to educate them, whatever. And so a year and a half, 2 years into this, we're not discouraged. We're having fun. Our family's living on mission, and it's kind of an adventure. But there was a level of burnout because you're dealing with a lot of issues, but you're not solving any problems. Mm-hmm. There's cycles of poverty and abuse that are just spinning out of control, and driving a baby to a hospital doesn't solve that cycle. Yeah. It saves that child's life, but it doesn't attack the bigger issue of why did that child get to the point of almost dying when it started with just a common sniffle cold. Yeah. Yeah. And so God started to, build this vision. We started asking God, man, if we're going to stay here, could you show us what the bigger thing that you want us to attack head on is going to be?
So I remember, and I used the metaphor in the first gathering this morning. It was like whack-a-mole. It's like every time something would pop up, you'd take care of that, and something else would pop up. At some point, though, you found yourself volunteering in the local middle school in Buena Vista. Talk about what you discovered through that process and the ways that you were trying to help.
Okay. So by being in the community and doing home visits, we found out that there was a middle school. It was very small, but it met in Buena Vista, and the director invited us to come and share the Bible and just spend time with the kids. So we went there, and we knew it was a poor village, and we were expecting it to look like, a school would in a poor village, but it was way worse than what we thought. Broken windows, water leaking from the roof, just desks piled up that were of no use in corners. It was a middle school that was using an elementary school space, so the desks were really small. So the physical condition was really not good at all.
Atrocious.
Yeah, atrocious. Yeah. Okay. And then the kids themselves were beautiful and full of potential and full of hope. The director was a great guy, really wanting to move forward, but their hands were tied. They had 2 textbooks. One was the teachers, and one was for all the students, which is about 15 students. And so they had barely any resources, like a broken chalkboard on the wall, hardly any desks, hardly any resources, not support from the government there in Buena Vista.
Yeah, so it was almost like they were dismissed by the bigger system that was supposed to be funding all of these things. How many students, how many teachers again?
There were 2 teachers for 3 grades and about 30 students.
Yeah, and you were telling me that your part of helping was at least trying to shrink the ratio of textbooks per student, and you went about.
Yeah, I remember going down and just kind of lobbying on behalf of the school. We need more books, and we thought we had a massive success story when we drove down there and they had told us we got books for us. We load them in the back of the car. We get back. I think it was 4 kids now sharing 1 book. So that was
you really arrived.
Small victory. We had arrived. We could go home.
Yeah, but up until that point, you were either photocopying books or you were like these kids literally would come to school and essentially write. They would copy by hand the text. So you really wouldn't learn anything. You just wrote.
They were spending 50% of their day copying whatever they would need to do homework at night. So when we actually photocopied those books, Watershed was the partner that I reached out to. You were one of our only partners at the time who gave us the money to make photocopies to to put a few more books in the students' hands.
So you're playing whack-a-mole with all these situations. You're volunteering in the middle school, and then all of a sudden, and you're realizing the systematic disconnect. And I want to make sure that our community hears what it was like for the way that the families viewed education too. So can you just lean into that just a little bit?
Sure. When we were there, sixth grade was the highest level of school like that. If you graduated from sixth grade, that was a big accomplishment. And so this director started in middle school just 3 years prior to us moving there. So it was just getting off the ground. And the families really didn't buy into it yet. They hadn't seen any results to know what the benefit of education would be past sixth grade. So they supported their children enough to say that they could go to school, but financially or intellectually they couldn't help in any way. And the community as a whole didn't think education past sixth grade was of any value whatsoever.
And really, I like how you said it early. You said there's the students, essentially the message was, you're really not valuable.
Yeah.
Like beyond just being workers in the field. Yeah. That's your lot in life.
Right, and the building represented that.
Yeah,
Nobody took any care to keep the building up. Nobody took any care to help in any way physically, because the message was, there's work to do in the fields, and you need to help our family. And so, there definitely wasn't an investment in the students.
So you're trying to, again, synthesize all that you're experiencing in the flow of that. These 13 graduates surface for you. So tell that story.
Yeah, so as we're going into school every day and interacting with the 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, we started to spend a little more time with the 9th grade group, which was 13 kids. I mean, and we're seeing and meeting these kids that are the first 13 kids from a village to ever make it, they're on the brink of making it past middle school, which is just huge. Their mothers and fathers, 2nd, 3rd grade. Again, most of the mothers, like our age, didn't even go to school. But the dad's 2nd, 3rd, big success story if you make it to 6. Here's these 13 kids that are about to graduate. But once again, because of families being more in survival mode, you don't see light at the end of the tunnel. You don't understand by investing in your child for a couple more years that you're going to be that much further down the road. And so for most of them, it was going to be the end of the road. But as we got to know them, they're all expressing dreams. They're all expressing hopes and telling us about wanting to be a teacher, telling us about wanting to be a secretary, and all of these different mechanic, electrician. In order to do that, they've got to go to high school. And in Guatemala, there's not a public high school system. It goes to a private level at that point, which only equates to $60 to $70 a month for a family. But the perspective for you to all understand is that $60 to $70 is about a week and a half income for the family. That's household income for a week and a half. So you have a father and a mother who have to decide, are the other 6 children that I have in my home going to eat, or am I going to send this kid to high school? And so the answer is no high school. And so we started a sponsorship program for these first 13 kids, just based on what would we do for our own kids. So let's sponsor the 13. And we didn't know what we were doing, obviously, because as it fast forwards a week, these kids start showing up at our house. They've started attending classes. And 3 girls show up at our door, knock on the door, and they're scared to death. They now are being given real homework assignments in a private school where they have to hop on this thing that's called the World Wide Web that they have no idea what that is. They've never even interacted with a computer, never taken a typing class, and they're scared to death. They're literally drowning, and we're on the hook because we've got 13 sponsors who've sent us money. We can't waste that money. Another one of those whack-a-moles. Yeah. And so we just so happened to have a friend who was coming to visit a couple of days later, and I called him up, and I'm not going to do the southern accent this time. But we called him up, and I was just, Paul, man, if there's any chance you could bring us some laptops. I don't know, this is a long shot. And he's like, man, give me a few minutes. He calls me back 2 hours later and had 6 laptops that he brought. And we turned our outside covered patio into a weekly cafe, like internet cafe, where these kids would come. And so first time that these girls showed up, again, scared to death, I put a laptop in front of them, and they looked up at me, and they looked down at this box on the table. They looked back up at me. They didn't know how to open it. I opened it for them. They didn't know how to turn it on, so I had to turn it on. And then we just quickly, with this group of students, I know it's illegal in the States, but, plagiarism and everything. But we taught them how to go online, find what they needed, copy and paste it, and put it in a Word document and turn it
Call
in
it a
for
day.
homework.
No one has ever plagiarized.
No one's ever done
in
that
this
here,
room. I
but-
just want you to know that.
so-
I'm deeply offended by that.
That was the just a quick solution, but knowing that we had to start teaching computer to these kids. And very quickly, we saw the potential realized just by giving them some touches and loving on them in the form of a computer class in our home. And these kids, they all ended up finishing the year. Nobody failed. They passed the year. But we've got another group of kids graduating this following year that are going to be in the same boat. What are we going to do? Oh, let's whack another mold. Let's go start teaching computers in the middle school. And
so what was interesting, so he's telling me these types of stories, 18, 24 months into the process, and the more you help, the more problems you create, because there's an energy, there's a momentum that starts to take place, and it's embryonic at the time, but to your credit, you're going, all right, there's got to be something. We have to do something significant. The whole time, asking God, what do you want? What's our thing? Is how you said it last gathering. And so that gets us back to the bean field. I'd been there for 2 or 3 days, and finally he says, all right, I want to show you this. And Mark and Gina drove us up into the middle of this bean field that sits right on the edge of the township. 7,000 people in this village, give or take a few thousand, and sits high above Guatemala City. And all of a sudden, they just become so animated. And they said, we have arranged to buy all of this property. We want to buy this bean field. And we want to put a school here. We want to put the very first, real school in this village. And over there is going to be the medical clinic. And over here is the pavilion where kids can run and play and have shelter. And maybe the community can hold events there. And then there's the school. And then there's grass, because there's no place for kids to play in Buena Vista. There's no grass. It's only just like sticks and mountainsides and all kinds of broken bottles and trash or whatnot. And why a school? Why did it become that? What's so significant about a school to solve this main problem?
I think you did very well. You summed it up excellently.
No, there's more. Come on, give me more.
Okay, so a school, because we believe in education. To educate is to empower. Education opens up a conduit for receiving and giving and growth and dignity and justice and everything to flow through education, not just with the textbooks or providing the teachers, which we have done with the help of Watershed over the years, but also by bringing them into a space that we could create the atmosphere for God's word to flourish there, for them to learn about how much God loves them, how much hope there is for them with Him, and to address all of the need, not just put Band-Aids on the issues that we saw, but to try to get down into the roots of the cyclical issues and break the chains that were keeping this village kind of underneath somebody else's control. And so, yes, we built the school. The public middle school moved into that space. They have their own classrooms with all the resources that they need, all the teachers that they need. And since opening the building, we've added a preschool and a primary school and another private middle school and a private high school. And the reason for the private is because there were many kids in the public school that you could see such potential just waiting to explode. But the public school's curriculum and what they had to offer wasn't sufficient to take them where they wanted to go.
There was a ceiling
Yes.
in and of that system itself.
Right, so we advocated and said, okay, let's get this private school going. And that's where the sponsorship program began. Many of the Watershed families have helped us sponsor either middle school students or high school students. And so we have 175 students that come every day, whether it's from preschool or one of the other educational programs. And that takes place in the morning And then in the afternoon, we have a running club, and we have a tutoring program for 6th graders that would be coming in to our 7th grade. And we have a literacy program for adults, for those moms and those dads who didn't really learn to read and write. What we've noticed is a climate change in Buena Vista because their kids are learning to read and write and coming home excited with actual books and things that they want to show their parents. And a lot of the parents are not able to participate in that in their children's lives. And so we've had several people come through the education literacy classes, learning how to read and write so that they could be involved in education with their kids.
So, and real quick, just please keep texting questions, because we're gonna get to a moment where we can engage you guys. So you're tell me some stories now, because you've got a preschool, you've got a private school, you got a public school, middle school, now you got a high school, which before, and I don't think you mentioned this, the kids were having to travel 45 minutes one way just to get to the private high school experience. And we don't have time to talk about your organic garden, but like even that's helping with the health and the wholeness, right?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, they get every student, every staff member, which there are about 30 staff that work with us, they get a nutritious snack, which is more like a breakfast, and the vegetables and fruit and stuff are grown in our organic garden in the back.
Yeah, so you're a farmer now.
Yeah.
So tell us some stories.
All right.
When you think about the work that you've been doing and where it has brought you today, what's the one or two people or stories that just melt you?
So my first story would be the little girl you see up on the screen. Her name is Alberta Blanca. She currently is in our 1st grade. We met her one Thanksgiving morning when our family decided to go out as a way of giving thanks. We bought food baskets and things. We wanted just to go and give some needy families. And we ended up in this section of Buena Vista that is really dark. Alcoholism, for some reason, in this corner of Buena Vista is just rampant. And we met this family. Little Blanca was 3.5 months old and weighed 4 pounds. And the mother was happy to present and show us her little baby. I don't even think the dad was there. He is an alcoholic, the father is. And so mom and baby were giving this food basket to them, and just in Jesus' name, letting them know that they're loved and that we're there, if anything. And we meet this little baby. And it started a journey of friendship with this family. Within a couple of days, we had little Blanca at the pediatrician. We had her being put on supplements and powdered milk, or formula, I guess you call it. And she started just progressing. She turns into this fat little baby and eventually can walk. And at that time, we're going out every month and weighing her and tracking her progress. We'd go and visit the family regularly. Every time we'd go and visit Blanca, she was scared to death of us. And this is part of the story because it's part of her transition. It's part of what love does. When love showed up in the form of baby formula to this little girl, and it helped save her life. And she turns into this little girl who's scared of us, ends up coming into our preschool, ends up now in our 1st grade. She's been with us for 3 years, and I get to watch Blanca walk into our building every day, just bounding in the building with happiness, healthy, learning, growing. She has a little brother named Marcos, who's also in our program in preschool right now. And I look at him, and I'm like, he's going to be the generation for that family line that breaks the cycle of alcoholism. His grandfather is one of the village alcoholics. His dad is. And here's little Blanca and Marcos that represent change has come for this family. And she's not scared of us anymore. That's part of the things that why it just really touches my heart, because you can't catch eyes with her where she doesn't run over now and hug me, kiss me. She's not afraid of me. I think she was afraid of him because she was afraid of her own father, because of the type of man that he is. And we're praying that God will change him. But with time and love, she's not afraid of us. And she for me represents something massive that's going to happen. What is Blanca going to look like when she graduates from our high school? What's the power that she's going to bring to that family? And then my second story is a young lady named Heldy Evelyn. She's special because she's one of the first 13 that we referenced earlier. She was one of the first graduates from middle school for Buena Vista. Her and her husband, Romario, were both part of that group. Evelyn was abandoned by her dad when she was young, and so single mom, when we met her, fighting to to keep the family on the right track, however possible. And I've gotten to be kind of a father to her. When her and Romario got married, I got to walk her down the aisle. They've had a baby since, who's now 3 years old. His name's Anthony, and they represent, we weren't really with her in school for a long time, but we helped them get, that bridge be built to where they could get to that next level. And Evelyn now was one of our secretaries at our building. She was one of the girls who had never used a computer, didn't know how to use the internet, and now she helps run the entire initiative of Educate BV. And when we watch their family, Evelyn and Romario represent this new generation that actually can help educate Anthony. I explode out of my skin with excitement because I cannot imagine what Anthony's experience is going to be like. This little boy who's going to be able to take homework home, and mom and dad can actually sit down at the table and help him with math or help him read, because that generation doesn't exist right now as far as our age. And so, but to see what's happened with her, it's massive.
Well, and what I love about you, what you mentioned in the first gathering, was how it's coming full circle. So the kids that you started working with early on are now moving back to the community and pouring themselves. So the economic level, the educational level, the holistic thing that you've been going after, physical, spiritual, emotional, there's a virus that you're unleashing through the work that you're doing. How would you answer the question, though, that what breaks your heart or what melts your heart?
I love all the students and everyone that comes through our center. We have an awesome staff of people. And what really motivates me every day and touches me every day, and that is a deep reward for me, is to watch our staff interact in their roles with the students. And it's been several years of trying to change the mindset of being holistic in your approach to life, not just education, but in your life. In Mark, where it talks about love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. That connection in our community hasn't existed, and it's starting to get momentum as they become whole and start drawing closer to Jesus and perfecting their craft of education or farming or cooking or whatever they do. They are able to love those students, and those students are going home and loving their family better. And so the holistic approach for me, and hearing it every day and watching it play out, and knowing that through our teams that come, through Watershed support, through family and friends who pray for the center, that all of it is working together. And seeing these teachers be able to come to work every day and do what God has called them to do, and we're equipping them to carry out their dreams. To me, I think that's beautiful. In my heart, that's beautiful.
That's how you wake up every morning.
Yeah, students coming in. We live on the second floor of the building, so I can hear the preschool teachers singing the morning salutation. I can hear the math teacher starting here, and that's our
I've
day.
often wanted to move in here and just so I could wake up to people walking in, but Hofer won't let me. I don't know why. No, but it's true. It's like we wake up every morning in Charlotte to all different noises, and like you're saying you're having your coffee, and you can literally hear the voices of the kids. You know who's speaking. Like, that's how into it you are. You're living amidst what is actually taking place. You look like you had something to say.
No, just emotional watching you share it. Seriously, it's good stuff.
So there's some questions that have been coming through. Do you mind fielding a few? Real quick, before I forget it, when you were walking in this morning, there was a table that was set up just outside those double doors, and it had some stuff from Mark and Gina that they'd love to put in your hand. And they're going to be in here afterwards, and then maybe out there in the hallway for a little bit to kind of field more questions or just hug their neck. Please come by and say hello. But then also Lauren George, who is a part of Watershed, who now lives in Antigua, just like 30 minutes away, doing some really powerful stuff. she brought hats that she's, any proceeds that are given towards the hat go towards the volcanic relief efforts. And I know we've all been kind of watching that from abroad. And I wish we had time to lean into it, but I know there's stuff happening there. So again, just to make you guys aware of it. But one of the questions that surfaced was, how has this impacted your faith? Like, how's it evolved? How's it shifted? What are some things you could say, man, this experience, I walked into seeing my faith journey this way, and now I see it this way. How would you, like, 30-second version?
Well, before this journey, I mean, I grew up that everything kind of had to make sense. I needed to know what tomorrow looked like. I needed to know, I mean, we grow up in a culture that we have 5 years, 10 years, we know what it looks like. And when God called us to do this, we didn't know what any of it looked like. I mean, we knew what we had in the bank, we knew how quick that would leave, and we just knew God was asking us to go love people. And the way that we've seen him provide, the way that we've seen him build a vision, the way that we've seen lives begin to be changed, it honestly makes us say, God, what's next? What? Give us something bigger, because we've seen what saying yes does.
Yeah.
It just increases your faith, and you want more of God. You want more of this adventure.
Would you articulate it the same way, or how would you respond to that?
Yes.
Yeah.
But for me, how it has changed my faith is just knowing how deep God's grace is for everyone, and how much he loves us all.
Yeah.
And it's simple, yes, Jesus loves me and all those things we know, but when you see it played out and you can be a part or observe or sense that God is at work through his grace, through his forgiveness for everyone, and we're all on this journey, pushing each other, carrying each other, locking arms together to live holistically. My faith is much more grounded in God's grace than it was before we moved there.
So let me piggyback all that, because there was another question that said, what is next for you guys? Like, what do you, 5-10 years down the road, what do you think this could look like?
We've been asked that before, and one thing is that I hope that we're not. I hope that we're still in Guatemala for one, and I hope that we're duplicating what's happening, because I want to see, I mentioned Anthony, Evelyn, and Romario's little boy. I want to see the power that's unleashed when that little boy is going through the programs, and that generation now that's being born to this educated generation, what that looks like. But while that's unfolding, we hope, they're not all called Buena Vista, but there are Buena Vista type rural villages scattered all over the mountains of Guatemala that need an advocate. And so if we could somehow propel our graduates into those villages to help their own, if God would maybe touch other families' hearts like ours. I mean, it might seem like a crazy move, but it wasn't difficult on a lot of levels. You just have to say yes, and God will take care of the rest of it. Maybe God wants another family to come and pick a village and do this, And I mean, we'd like to see it duplicated and maybe be overseeing a half a dozen of these eventually.
So this isn't a... or wait a minute, yeah, I guess it is. I get it. It's a question and a thank you from someone. Geez, you're killing me up here. Someone who was a part of one of those first teams that I was actually a part of this team. And he says, thank you for helping shape me into the man/father I am today. I try to imitate you as best I can. Do you ever feel lonely or discouraged by the naysayers and complainers in a hyper-cynical world? So that's the first part of the question. What did opposition look like for you? Because at one level, I don't think this is. I wasn't surprised by this, but this might be surprising for someone to know that not everybody was excited for you to try to help. Yeah. So can you kind of talk about that?
So I think of that question was, do you ever feel lonely?
Yeah.
Yes. We miss.
Did you rehearse that?
No, but we missed this right here for the last 9 years. It doesn't exist. This isn't about us. And we didn't go to Guatemala to have spiritual community like this. We went to Guatemala because God was asking us to create that in a village that knows nothing about that. And so God's giving us community with our teenagers and people that are in that world. But opposition in the village looked like some people who didn't want us teaching the boys to respect women. The men asked us to stop doing that, which is absurd, because at the end of the day, it's only going to help. They didn't want there to be a voice saying that the daughters have equal value as the sons. Before we moved, opposition here looked like family members who thought we were nuts. And fellow believers or spiritual communities saying, how can you do that to your kids? And us saying, God's asking us to do it, and he's asking us to put our children in his hand and just say, God, I don't know how this is going to play out for, at the time, 4 of our kids, now 5, but just to say, God, we trust that you have a plan that we don't see. Yeah. And you ignore the opposition. And you lock arms with people like Ahmad O'Neill, who 9 years ago, when we said we're moving, his family said, we believe in this, and we want to support you. And he then said, we'll photocopy books for you guys. And our church now, you learn to be fueled by the people who get you and who are behind you. And cast the naysayers over there. They can go bother somebody else because God's given us something to look to and to do.
Yeah. No one ever has objections towards us here at Watershed. I just want you to know that. I'm being sarcastic. How do you stay committed to the process? How do you, is it hard sometimes to just keep going? Like, what keeps you like turning back and going, we have to keep focused here?
We get off focus. I mean, we get off track. We make a lot of mistakes, and we wish we didn't do some of the things we did. I mean, it's just normal. But the vision to bring grace and change and love and hope to Buena Vista is always there. And our methods change, and the way we go about it in different programs get started or work or don't work. But honestly, our prayer life has become an anchor for us, because just being connected to Jesus, I mean, he sent us there. We believe that, and we know that it's through him that only true change can come, only healing can come to brokenness. We believe that, and we rest in that. So when one of us gets, whatever, pity party or angry or in a slump, thank God the other one hasn't been in the same spot yet. Just to remind ourselves and go to prayer and be like, God, you have to help us. We're either discouraged or we're lonely, or, our kids have suffered, lightly I say that word, for just being in a different culture, and handing them over and over and over and saying, God, we want to serve you. We're here for you. We want to love you and help. Just help us. And so our grounding and keeping the vision is really just, it sounds simple, but it's making sure we're walking with God the way he wants us and doing what he wants us to do. Yeah. It brings a peace of knowing we're okay.
So talk about your kids for a second, because even in the last gathering, and this is probably the last one we'll have time for, but what's been the educational process for your kids, and what's the 1 or 2 things that you would say this has been hard, maybe if that's too personal, that's fine, or what we know this has been built into our kids. Like, just can you talk about your kids a little bit? And I'll kind of give you freedom to go wherever you need to go in all of that.
You're going to end up getting 2 different perspectives probably, but I'll go first. No, I just, on the front end, or during the journey, there's been at times sadness when you watch and what your average teenager in our culture, the U.S. culture, would be experiencing, and that your kids are missing out on that. And that's where you push into God and you trust that what they're gaining is much more than what they had to sacrifice. Yeah. our oldest two, actually our oldest three, they're all stateside now, married and whatever, all kind of did a homeschool modified thing. But our younger two, Eli just graduated from high school, but he, in 4th grade, entered into Guatemala's system,
Wow.
full Spanish, and graduated from our private school just this week. And Cruz was a surprise, a very great surprise to our family. We thought we were done, but God gave us this little boy, and he was born in Guatemala. And he has said 1,000 times on this trip, "Oh, I love the U.S. I love the U.S." Because, like, this is not his norm, you know. I think he loves the smooth roads, and there's no speed bumps everywhere, and buses running us off the road. So for him,
Yeah.
you know, he's grown up, and
That's all he's known.
that's what he knows, and
Yeah.
that's his norm. And running and hugging these kids that, come to school with lice and, issues, and
Yeah.
his norm is just to run up and hug them, and just to, he doesn't know any better, and we
Yeah.
love that, because that's like who we want to be. We want to love with no borders, like this little boy Cruz does.
So I don't know if I have a language for how much gratitude we have for you guys. When you're starting something like this, there's all the work that you want to do within the group of people that you're pulling together. The people who are standing in solidarity with each other, and then from there, you start to recognize we've been given this gift that needs to flow into the world, into places that are broken, and whatever privilege we have should mean advocacy and transformation, and us sacrificing so that in the world where people are hurting, like, we show up the way that God would show up, just arms wide open, full of grace and mercy, everything that you described. It's harder to figure that out when you move beyond the physicality of your own environment, So here locally, we pour a lot of human capital into the initiatives that we're a part of. And so we volunteering and mentoring and whatever it is we do locally. But then from a global perspective, it's hard to become physical in those environments. So you send a lot of resources. We've kind of had this philosophy: bodies at home, resources abroad. But what's been rare about the way that our partnership has existed is that there's probably been 60 or maybe even 70 people that have stood on the soil and watched what this means. And so thank you for saying yes. And thank you for allowing us just to have a small piece of the pie in all of this. Every time we give here in this community, work like yours is fueled. And so, like I mentioned this earlier, resources matter, because every time a child crawls up in the lap of a dad who can read, like, that's a real high-end return on an investment, right? There's more going on than just lights being flipped and power being used. And so thank you for your friendship. You've said some really gracious things about me over the past 2 hours. I continue to have a group of people around me that I look to and go, how am I going to be challenged? And you guys have certainly done that for 18 years, and I just love you.
Thank you. Well, thank you. And Watershed, for us, it's a privilege to be able to be on the stage finally after 9 years, and to say thank you to you guys on behalf of our friends and your friends and neighbors that live in Buena Vista. For us, we moved there to be advocates for the poor. And when we moved there, we needed an advocate. And you guys are a huge part of that team of people that advocate for us with resources and prayer and presence. 70 or so people who visited there, and so many of you have hugged us today. It's cool to see you all. But this is God's story. It's not the Schmidt story. It's not Watershed's story. But the beauty of it is that He allows all of us to be involved in it. And so, as I tell the story of Blanca and the fact that she has life today because somebody was able to show up at her door, we were able to show up because we had Watershed behind us. Evelyn is able to be a professional and Romario a professional and raise their family different because they have a church behind them in the U.S. who is helping propel them forward. So thank you from Buena Vista, and thank you from Mark and Gina and our family. We love you guys.
There's on the app on the Sunday news portion, Ashley wanted to make sure that I was reminded to do this. If you're interested in being a part of the next Team Guatemala, sometime next 12 months or so, we're going to start putting that together. Go ahead and get your name in there, and would love to start to figure out who's going to be a part of that. I know there's some limitations. It's like we can't take everybody there, but there's a team. And can I pray for you guys? And just thank you again for all that you do and who you are. God, we are just the experience of the way that lives connect together, and the hope that gets produced in how you breathe new life into people like myself and the Schmidts, and then how that spirals out of control in a village, what feels like a half a world away, to the transformation that's taking place here in our community. There's something at work, and it's you. And we're so grateful for the way that you not only change us, but that you have worked through us. I pray for every need that exists in that village to be met. I'm thankful for the way the change is it's materializing, the way that families are treating each other, the way that hope is being exported out of this community center. And God, we can't wait 5, 10, dare I say 15 years down the road, where we get to keep sitting on stage and telling stories and watching, who knows, not just a village be transformed, but maybe a whole basket full of villages, or even an entire country. Nothing's too big for you, and we just trust that who we are together, you'll continue to use that in ways that are just powerful and full of life. We love you. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Will you give Mark and Gina a huge round of applause?